Project Binky in colour. Starring Nick Blackhurst. Also starring Richard Brunning. And Rex Hamilton as Abraham Lincoln. Tonight's episode, Life, the Universe and Binky. Coming up in episode 42, Nick fails to get a proper handle on the meaning of FOMO. I get one of those rare light bulb moments. And we both mourn the loss of one of the shed's stalwarts.
Call it.
At the end of the previous episode, we'd created a new switch panel for the Mini and got that installed in the car, along with finishing the instruments and the rest of the dashboard. It worked so well, in fact, that subsequently we took the optimistic decision to finally finish our custom-made PCB. Before we go any further, after months of handling, the board has got decidedly grubby. So, a little acetone and a phalanx of cotton buds are deployed to clean up the mess. The board is going to be protected by a coating of epoxy resin. This two-part formula calls for equal measures of the chemicals to be mixed together with a small stick. In addition to the resin, for our aesthetic needs, we're adding a few drops of green pigment. The green really complements the dirty dishwater colour of Nick's eyes. We've gummed up the holes with a little plasticine to keep the resin on the top of the board where we want it. This stuff claims to have a working time of about 40 minutes at room temperature. Well, this room is bloody freezing, so we're expecting a little longer to work with it. It took a few days for the epoxy to go really hard. I guess age does that to you. But now it's time to swallow a brave pill and take a small rotating sharp thing to the board to trim the excess away. Once again, the 3D printer comes in clutch, allowing us to make a fixture for the board that's clamped firmly to the bed. Honestly, I wouldn't be without it now. Many of you have been screaming at us to fix and cover the traces, but rest assured that the potting of the board like this was always the intention. Up until recently, it's been necessary to make some adjustments to the design and componentry, and once the epoxy went on, there's no going back, so we had to be sure. That's one job we weren't looking forward to, but now we can move on down the dash, under the new switch panel, and on to the heater controls. You've seen the mechanicals behind the heater controls before, and we put considerable effort into making the OEM stuff fit as it came out of the MG to save ourselves a lot of work at this stage.
The only thing we didn't do was to remove the OEM printed circuit board for the original bulbs and replace it with, thank you Brigitte, a new one with some LEDs that much better matches the rest of our backlighting. We hadn't done this at the time because way back then we didn't actually know that we needed to. Although there is some evidence to suggest that staying with the original incandescent bulbs wasn't a great idea anyway.
The heater control assembly goes together like this. First, the clear lens unit that spreads the light around, followed by the black plastic masks that block the light in pertinent places, and then finally the face. The face, Nick. Nick, where's the face?
Yeah, it's at this point that, possibly not for the first time, things have gotten a little bit complicated. But it is possibly for the first time not actually entirely my fault. Allow me to explain.
The MG's face is perfect except for one minor drawback.
Yep, it's orange, and there's nothing we can do about it, and we did try.
You can see the orange paint on the top one here. We attempted to remove the colour, but the screen printed faces weren't having any of it.
Now, up until fairly recently, that might have been a problem.
Our experience creating the new gauge faces in the dash meant we could quickly come up with a design and a print for the heater controls. The challenge was going to be how to cut out the three circles, because they needed to be very accurate indeed. Well, what's more accurate than a frickin' laser beam? Nothing, that's what. So we came up with a procedure to cut out the shapes on our Creality A1 Falcon, and it worked a treat. After dialing in the laser strength and the travel speed on some scrap pieces, it'll cut acrylic up to 6mm thick, Lining up the workpiece precisely was really the trickiest part. After that, it's just lasers. There's two pieces to the face and they have to be lined up perfectly, so the accuracy and repeatability of this process was the key to a successful outcome. If only I had a spare shark kicking about. After carefully gluing the two pieces together, a lick of white paint on the backing completes the face. And now, the heater controls can be installed. I know what you're thinking. What have you done with the knobs? Predictably, there's an order of operations to the assembly, and it's much easier to fit the centre console fascia without them. You might remember this from such episodes as Binky, the aluminium years, but it's almost unrecognisable since Darwin Composites got their hands on it. Even though they managed to find the exact same carbon weave to match the dashboard, we can't help thinking that it would benefit from some embezzlement. Never one to miss an opportunity to fire up the old Myford, Nick gets to work creating a trio of rings for the heater controls that match the aesthetic of the gauges in the dash. We ummed and ahed over exactly what to do with the heater controls finish. We tried a few things, but the shiny ring piece motif permeates the interior of the Mini, so we eventually decided that this would look the best. Polishing your ring with a smearing of anisole nets a very satisfying result. Do that 3 times, and we're good to go. Installing them is a breeze with a nice press fit, making sure they don't fall out. So that's the trim rings sorted. But that's not the end of it. We've also finished the gear stick gaiter. This also features a nice press fit, but it needs a secondary means of attachment. So I whipped up a retaining ring on the 3D printer, which has 4 grub screws to hold it firm. Okay, so now the centre console can be completed. The handbrake gaiter, with its hand-stitched freshwater otterskin, is the last part of the centre console assembly to get fitted. And there it is, complete for the first time. Although, I've got a sneaking suspicion Nick's not completely happy with the finish on the cup holders. But we'll park that for now. Before we go any further, the car needs a bloody good hoover, because at the moment it's 69% dust and detritus. And with the untimely demise of shed favourite James, I've brought Henry along to get the job done. The parcel shelf contains no parcels, but it is covered in grime, so a damp microfiber cloth is deployed to take care of the cleansing. After the rears, it's the turn of the front seats to get installed. These too got a cursory wipe over with a cloth, but like everything, they'll need a more thorough cleaning after we're done with the rebuild. The area between the seat and the sill, A, looks unfinished and tatty, and B, currently a waste of useful space. So, we've made a couple of trim panels out of some aluminium sheet and glued some carpet to them. They sit on the runner and extend down to the floor, giving us a useful pocket for a bottle of water perhaps, or scotch. That's much better, but there's still a gaping chasm needing to be filled. So, I've made a CAD template, Natch. I've traced it onto a piece of aluminium, just like the good old days. And I'm gonna cut it out on the bandsaw. A little further shaping is needed, so it's time to fire up the finger sander, one of our very favourite tools, because let's be honest, who doesn't enjoy a good fingering? The original plastic trim needs relieving because the new panel uses the same fixing bolt. And now the aluminium can get rolled around this handily sized bearing to put a nice curve in it. That apes the front corner of the seat. Finally, the panel gets some colour. Black didn't work for us, so we've gone for the Volvo grey we used under the hydrographics. While the paint dries, I'm going to satiate my inner pyromaniac with the blowtorch. But I'm going to try very hard indeed, this time, not to set anything on fire, because a deft touch is needed to restore the OG seat trim panels back to their former glory. The blowtorch melts away the old oxidised layer and pulls fresh materials to the surface, making for a rejuvenated part. The transformation is remarkable, but it's not permanent, so I'll have to keep my eye on it. That looks a whole lot better. I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out, but there's one tiny fly in the ointment. Ah, that's better. Nice. To keep the lower panels in place, I quickly designed a fastener that's possible to undo by hand or even with a coin should we need to access the underside of the seats in a hurry. And then just printed them on our K2 Plus in carbon fibre reinforced PLA. The finish is perfect. There's a captive M6 nut that the screws get wound into under either end of the panel. There's no load on them, so the plastic should be fine. We've also made some trim panels for the front of the seat, and they get installed in exactly the same manner. And that's the seat trim sorted. Not too shabby. Next on the list are the bulkhead kick panels that hide all sorts of skullduggery. And, just like a real car, they use hidden trim poppers to hold them in place. The interior is coming together nicely, but there's one glaring omission, and that's this hot mess around the steering column. The original mini column surround doesn't fit the MG's collapsible column, it doesn't fit the steering column switches, and it doesn't fit the ignition barrel. But we do have a later version that does fit the switches and the ignition barrel. Sadly, it doesn't fit the dashboard or around the steering column. What does fit the column is this one off the MG ZR, and it fits the switches and the clock spring, but in almost every other regard, it's completely useless. Not for the first time, what we really need doesn't exist, and it's not going to be an easy job to sort out. And if a job's going to be that difficult, it's worth getting somebody else to do it. What we needed was a surround that took the best bits from each of the three designs and amalgamated them into a unit that would fit our car. So, we enlisted the help of our friend Antonio Carrozza, again, who took some time out from winning the British Touring Car Championship, again, to scan and 3D print us some ideas. It was a bit of an iterative process, as you might imagine, but we quickly came up with a workable design, and then Antonio set about working out the details. His method for clipping the two parts together is sublime. Once we were happy with the fit, the final parts were printed and sent off to Dean at Trimworks to be covered in that lovely Italian black leather. Installation is a breeze, with 3 screws holding the bottom half to the column, and then the top part goes on and just gets gently squeezed into place. The finished article is terrific. It just needs finishing off with a wheel. The original plan was to use the Tom's wheel off the Celica that donated the running gear, but it's not really tidy enough and it's far too big. So I found something cheap off AliExpress that's the right size. After screwing the boss to the back, the wheel goes onto the column. The all-important washer and nut that holds the wheel are installed before being tightened to the required torque.
Click.
The horn push goes in next, and this is just held in using an integrated spring clip. Before finally, the outer trim ring is pushed home to complete the look. It's really very nice indeed, and to hold it is to touch the very essence of life.
Nice. Cheap, you say?
Yes.
Well, we can't call it finished. That is at least all of the soft furnishings fitted, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to financially recover. So we need to protect our investment by refitting the glass. But that isn't quite as simple as just cleaning it off and refitting it, especially when it comes to the rear quarter windows.
It would be nice to find something we could just clean and fit, but this is not our lucky day. The frame is chrome-plated steel, and while its 45 years haven't been exactly kind to it, I've seen a lot worse. Elbow grease is for people who haven't got power tools, and we've got loads, so I'm taking the most efficient way out of this task with some cutting compound and a 90-degree die grinder. The age-related marks are no match for the Milwaukee, and after a measure of buffing, it shines up real nice. To get in the nooks and crannies, a small wire brush is deployed. On a power tool, obs. To do a proper job, the frame needs to be removed. So, out comes the little screw, before some heat is deployed to soften the seal. And then, some careful wrestling to separate the glass from the frame. More heat. This is a lot of trouble to go to, but it's necessary because astonishingly, you can't just buy new frames.
But you can buy new glass, so we did. While the glass will keep the weather out, actually the biggest threat to this interior is sunlight. Yeah, even in England. So, to help mitigate that, we're going to fit some protective film.
So, while Nick gets on with that, I'm gonna get the funk out.
Before the freshly fettled glass can go in its frame, we need to install some little spacers knocked up on the 3D printer. They hold the glass in the middle of the channel and at a fixed distance from the bottom of the section. When it was originally made, I think the good folks at Longbridge either had a preformed rubber U-section for the seal, or more likely just splurged some schmoo in the channel, fitted the glass, wiped off the excess with an oily finger, and hoped for the best. Our plan is to clamp the frame to the glass using a couple of sash clamps and a handy piece of timber. This makes sure that the frame is hard up against the spacers and stays square and true. Then splurge some schmoo into the gap between the glass and the frame, wipe it off with an oily finger, and hope for the best. An acetone-soaked rag cleans up the excess sealant, and now the glass is ready to be fitted to the car. When originally assembled, the window was held to the B-post by two self-tapping screws. You might remember that we changed this arrangement by drilling out the holes and installing some M4 steel inserts instead. There's no real hinge to this opening window. The U-shaped brackets are made, we think, of chrome-plated spring steel. It's actually quite a clever low-cost design that works perfectly, which I suppose it's hardly a surprise given the rest of the original Mini was designed with the same ethos. The over-centre clasp at the rear of the glass is also fixed to two new M4 inserts in the C-post, and the 4 screws is all it takes to install the Mini's opening rear window. I can't resist a spritz with the glass cleaner to get rid of the myriad marks we just put all over it. And the finishing touch is a little black plastic sleeve I made to go over the pull handle. You've already seen us put the rear and front glass in once, and for those of you that haven't, it consists mainly of two slightly balding middle-aged men using bucket loads of lube and grunting a lot. And frankly, no one needs to see that. So, here's the glass in and finished. Next on the list for reattachment is the boot lid, which is affixed with 4 dodgy Phillips head screws and 2 support wires. Complicated? This stuff is not, but it is filthy. The pièce de la résistance of the boot is the badge, and this one is special. After the bumper goes on, the last things to fit on the back are the lenses. But before we do, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk to you about seeing the light. I'm not being philosophical, I'm talking about the relatively simple job of upgrading the bulbs. The space constraints we have mean the battery hides under the passenger seat and it's not exactly huge. Couple that with the unproven charging system and we might end up having a problem. We've talked about the how and the why, but we haven't yet mentioned the what. And it turns out there's a surprising amount of them. The original incandescents on this car in certain circumstances can draw over 300 watts, which is the same as 22 of these modern domestic light bulbs, or about the same length as 6 football pitches. There are a multitude of different designs of LED bulbs out there to suit pretty much every application and every budget. But what we found was that not all of these LED upgrades were suitable for the Mini. The original incandescent bulbs in the original lenses work really well and give off an excellent red light in the stop and tails. I figured I could just whack something like these in and be done with it. Turns out they were terrible. The red lens got washed out badly, the camera makes it look better than it is, so it was back to the drawing board. I found these little blighters which have a colour to them. The red cobs give off a red light, the orange ones give off an orange light, and the yellow ones give off a white light, obviously. These worked a treat, and combined with the rest of the LED light upgrades, the power requirements are just 15% of the incandescents, which is nice. With the bulb sorted, I've just got to screw the lenses back on. So with the back end buttoned up, before we go any further forward, now's a good time for a brew. After a little light refreshment, we can move toward the front of the car and focus briefly on the mirrors.
Yeah, after spending a lot of money on those shiny bullet mirrors, we found out they were completely useless. So we went back to the OEM ones.
Finding them to be only available in white, we dropped them off at Tony's for him to paint them the same black as the roof. Excellent. Now let's go get the flip front and start working on that. Before the bright work goes on, there's a couple of extra little jobs that need doing. First of which is to black up the centre support here. Nick doesn't like them to show through the grille. This tape is mainly used to repair tears in silage bags, but we found another purpose for it, and it looks great. The second job is to add some gold heat shielding to the underside of the bonnet. I love gold. And this will help keep the hot turbo and exhaust from blistering the paintwork. Right, with those jobs sorted, now we can fire the front end together.
So why have we diluted the purity of our late model Mini aesthetic by chucking on this Mark I Cooper S front grille? Well, a couple of reasons. Firstly, this grille allows a lot more airflow into the radiators to help cooling, and secondly, it's because I like it. Besides, we wouldn't be the first car guys on YouTube to subject you to an age-inappropriate moustache now, would we? Anywho, you can't really judge this front end yet because there's still a piece missing. And I've always believed that this car should wear its original British Leyland bonnet badge boldly.
There weren't too many made with a Leyland badge, they were mostly Austin or Mini or oh my god, you fucking tart.
Worry ye not, this is neither the end of the series nor the end of the build, but what it is the part of the build where we need to find out what we got right and what we got wrong. And to do that, we need to get this car out of the shed.
Tune in next time for another exciting episode from the files of Project Binky.